Welcome, everybody. What we're going to cover today is how to do calculations when you have a mixed problem. As you recall, there is a separate rule for when you multiply and divide with significant figures as opposed to when you add and subtract. So we're going to take a look at what happens when you have a mixed operation involving the two. Well, first of all, notice that the problem at the bottom you have, you're going to do the parentheses first, and then you're going to multiply. You're going to follow the same order of operations that you normally do. Here's how this works. You see, when you do a mixed operation, we don't round after every step. What you want to do is round only one time at the very end. And whatever operation you do last, that's the rule that you're going to use. In this example, you can see we're going to subtract first. Because it's in parentheses, then multiply. Since multiplication is the last rule or the last operation being used, we're going to use the multiplication rule, which is to divide or to round by the number that has the least number of significant figures. Now, I have a big recommendation. As I told you, when you add and subtract, I would write the numbers, if they're written horizontally, I would write it vertically. So I would get the 5.67 and align it here and subtract it minus the 2.3. Now when you do this, you're going to get 3.37 as your answer. This is just the parentheses. Now if we were just subtracting alone and using the subtraction rule, we would look at which position has this that both numbers have a significant figure. And if you notice, this number here doesn't have a significant figure, but in this position right over here, they both have a significant figure. So if we were to round, it would end up being 3.4. Remember that position would be the last spot that is significant. Now here's what we're going to do differently. We don't want to round because we have another step. So what I'm going to train you to do is I want you to mark by underlining the spot that would be the last significant digit. If we were to round, that would be where this 3 is, in this position. So I'm going to underline it. And what I'm going to do, because we have an extra step, is I'm going to keep the entire number. Notice that's what they did over here. They underlined what would be the last significant digit, and they kept the entire number. And then you do the next step. Now you're going to multiply the 3.489 times the 3.37. And when you do that, okay, you're going to see that the answer you're going to get is 11.75793. Now, here, since this is the last step and we multiplied, we're going to use the multiplication rule. See, this number over here has 4 significant figures. Now, remember, the last significant figure here is the one you underlined. Okay? Based on the previous step, that number only has 2 significant figures, although we used the entire number for the calculation. So this one only has 2 significant figures. So the rule is to go by whoever's the lowest, which would be the 2. So we just want to show 2 significant figures. Now remember, this 7 is going to bump that number up. And when you round this number, it ends up being 12 as your final answer. Okay? Let's take a look at some more examples. If you look here, we have in part A, 6.78 times 5.903 times, and then we have this parentheses here. Now, I know the solutions are here on the side. Here's what I'm going to do. We're going to use this page to go back and check our answers. I'm going to go to a blank page here, and I'm going to actually do this problem with you. Okay? So the sample problem is we got 6.78 times 5.903, and then times, and then we got this part here, which we'll do first. We're going to subtract these two numbers. Now, again, What I recommend is, since we're doing the subtraction, I recommend that you put this vertically, align it, which is very important. We're going to do a little subtraction here, and we're going to get 0.479. Now, using the subtraction rule, the position where we would cut the number off would be here, because this number doesn't have a significant figure. So here's what I'm going to do. Since this is the position that we want to keep, I want to underline this to keep track of what would have been the cutoff point. The only reason that I am not rounding it is because we have another step. See, what we're going to do now is we're going to get the 6.78. We're going to multiply it by the 5.903. And then we're going to multiply it by this number that we just calculated. Again, I'm going to underline this to keep track of my last significant figure. Now, when you plug this into your calculator, you're going to get 19.1707. We're going to go ahead and now, since this was our last step and all of it is being multiplied, we're going to use the multiplication rule because it's the last operation that we did. If you notice, this number has 3 significant figures. This one has 4, but here's the important one. This one doesn't count. This is the last significant figure, the 7. So technically this number only has 2, and that happens to be the lowest. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our answer here. We're going to round it to show only 2. This will do nothing to the 9, and our number after rounding ends up being 19. Okay? And then we'll go back so that you can verify. You can see here in the solution section, it's being worked out. Okay? And there's the number we got in blue, and then the answer is 19. Now let's do the same thing for part B. Okay, we'll come back and check the solution section in just a second. All right, so let's go here. And part B, we got, let me put this with the other pencil here. There we go, 19.667 minus 5.4 times 0.916. Now this time what we're going to do is we're going to multiply the parentheses first. Now when you get your calculator and you multiply, you end up getting 4.9464. Now if we were to round this number, okay, according to significant figures, this one has 2, this one has 3. We would use the multiplication rule and we would round the number to the lowest, which is 2. That means that our number would stop here. Now, I don't want to round. I'm going to keep the entire number because we have another step. However, I'm going to keep track by underlining that 9 to show that the number that we're going to use next only has 2 significant figures. So here you're going to get the 19.667. Now, we're doing subtraction. So again, I would align this carefully like this. And then we're going to go ahead and perform our subtraction, align everything, 14.7206. And we're going to use the subtraction rule because our last operation was subtraction. Now, what you want to do here is remember that we had underlined the 9. So we got to keep track. This is the last significant figure. Even though there's a 4 and a 6 next to that 9 and a 4 afterwards, all those numbers are not significant because of the first step. The 9 is the last significant figure. So when you now use the rule and it's based on position, none of these numbers here count. So this position over here, which I'll mark, technically is the last position where both numbers have a significant figure. So this is our cutoff point. When this number gets rounded, okay, it ends up being just 14.7. And that would be the answer to this problem. Now we'll go back and you can see here in the solution section, the blue part is the number without being rounded. Notice how the 9 is underlined, keeping track of significant figures. And then there you have your final answer. Okay, let's take a look now at these two Skill Builder sample problems. Let's look at A. In part A, we have in parentheses, you're subtracting first. So let's go ahead and align that as we normally do. Just like this. Okay, make sure you align it properly. And when you go ahead and place this in your calculator, you're going to get 330.42. Now, if we were to round the position that we would round to, this one doesn't have a number. It would be this spot right here. Now, again, we have another step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to underline the 4, knowing that this is not the final step, just to keep track of what is my last significant figure. Then I'm going to go ahead and put 3.897 here. We're going to multiply that by 330.42. Again, I'm going to keep track of my last significant figure. And when you put this in the calculator, you're going to get a very long number. You're going to get a 128.7.64674. Now, we're going to use the multiplication rule because it's the last operation that we performed. If you look at the numbers that we have, this has 4 significant figures, okay? But so does this one. So when they're both the same, it's easy. If they both have 4 significant figures, the answer has 4 significant figures. So we're going to round to show 4. Just remember that this bumps up. That 6 will bring that number up. And our final answer is 1288. Okay? Now, go ahead and try part B. If you want, pause. And I'll go ahead and try that. And then we'll come right back. And I'll work it out for you to see if you got the correct answer. Okay. Hopefully you worked on part B. And here the first thing we're going to do is we're going to divide the 4.58 divided by 1.239. So that should be the first thing you did, just using normal order of operations. And you probably got 3.696529459, a very long number. Okay? Now, had we rounded to significant figures, notice 4.58 has 3 significant figures and 1.239 has 4. So had we rounded, we would use the division rule, which is to go with the lowest. We would show 3. So I'm going to underline the 9. That would have been my last significant figure. Here's what I'm going to do. We got one more step. We're going to subtract. And I've always told you to align the numbers. So we're going to put 0.578 here. We're going to subtract over here. And when we do that, we end up getting 3.118529459. Now remember, the last significant figure in the first number is the one I underlined here, the 9. Okay? So technically, all of these numbers are not significant. Remember that we're going to use the subtraction rule because it's the last operation we did. It's based on position. And if you look at the position, this spot right here is the position where both numbers have a significant figure. So that's going to be our cutoff point right over here. Because we have an 8 here, this will get bumped up. And when this gets rounded, our final answer ends up being 3.12. Okay, so hopefully that's the answer that you got. Okay, let's take a look at our last 2 sample problems. Here's the first one. I want you to go ahead and try that. Pause the video. And then we'll come back and check it. Okay, so hopefully you were able to do this. Let's go ahead and see if you got the correct answer. So the first thing I would do here is let's go ahead and align these numbers because it is going to be addition. And when that gets done, you get 11.262. The important part here is the significant, keeping track of the last significant figure. The position where both numbers have a significant figure is here. So look what I'm going to do. I'm going to underline that spot. I'm going to keep the entire number because there's another step involved. The next step is I'm going to get the 51 and I'm going to divide it by the 11.262. I am going to keep this underlined to keep track of my last significant figure. And then I'm going to perform division, which is our last step. Now, when you divide these two numbers, you end up getting 4.52850293. Now we're going to go ahead and use the division rule, which is the same as the multiplication. We're going to find out who has the least number of significant figures. Well, 51 only has 2 significant figures, and this number has only 3. No matter how you put it, this one ends up being the lowest because it only shows 2 significant figures. So when you round our number to 2 significant figures, our answer ends up being 4.5. So hopefully that's the answer you got to this problem. Okay? Let's try one more. Look at this sample problem here. Go ahead and try it. Pause the video, and when you're ready, we'll come back and check the solution. All right. Hopefully you are back. And here's what we're going to do. Let's do those parentheses first. Again, I always tell you to align when you're adding and subtracting. So we're going to go ahead and do this. We're going to subtract these two numbers. You're going to end up getting 4.019. Now, notice here, this is the spot. Both numbers, their final position is significant. So this, we're going to use the entire number anyways. Okay? Now, the next thing we're going to do is, and we can do all of these together because multiplying and dividing use the same rule. So you're going to end up multiplying 101.1 times 42.3. Okay? And then you're going to, once you get that answer, you're going to divide it by 4.019. Okay? And when you do the math here, you're going to get a very long number. You're going to get 1,064.078129. Now, let's use it doesn't matter if it's multiplication or division, it's the same rule. The first number has 4 significant figures. The second number only has 3. And the fourth one has 4 because we used all the numbers from the previous step. The lowest is 3. Now, there's something here that I want to show you to make sure that when this happens, that you know how to round correctly. We only want to show 3. Okay? However, there's a spot here. Look what I'm going to do. When you round, you got to show the 1, you got to show the 0, you got to show the 6. However, you must put a 0 for this spot, for the ones place. If you don't put a 0, you don't have the correct value. You see, 1,060 and 106 are completely different values. The 0 there gives it the proper value. Notice that by putting the 0, you are not disobeying the rule. That number still has 3 significant figures, but with the 0, it has the correct value. That 0 is an example of something called a placeholder. Okay? So that's the reason why that 0 was there. It is not significant. You're still obeying the rule. Another thing that you can do, another way to express this answer is to use scientific notation. You can also put 1.06. That number has 3 significant figures. But when you change it to scientific notation, you got to move the decimal 3 spaces to the left, which means it's times 10 to the 3, positive 3 as an exponent. So this answer can be expressed either in long form or in scientific notation. Both answers have the correct value and both answers have 3 significant figures. Okay? So one point I want to emphasize is when you have a multiple step problem, a mixed operation, don't round after every step. Perform the step, like in this example, we did the parentheses, and then mark with a line what would be the last significant figure if you were to round. Okay? But don't round. Just make a mark. Use the entire number for the next step, keeping track by underlining the last significant figure from the previous step. And then keep working on your steps. Whatever you end up doing last, use that rule as the rule to round your final answer. In this case, we were multiplying and dividing. They both use the same rule. So notice how in this problem, we rounded according to the multiplication division rule, which is to go by whoever has the least number of significant figures. Okay, so hopefully that with practice, you will get better at doing these types of problems.